All right. Good evening and good night, and welcome to the HR Perspective Talk Show. It is Thursday, February 11th, 2016. It's about 8:07 p.m. This is the HR Perspective Talk Show every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, weekly 8 p.m. until. Yes, we do have a telephone number tonight. The telephone number is 340-201-9005. You can also text us on that number as well. But most importantly, Soup, you got to go to our website, streaming live from the VI.com. Go to that website tonight because we do have a very, very special guest, long-time guest in the studio again tonight. He's heard all of this, but I got to say it for our new listeners. We are in a high-tech, low-tech studio coming to you from an undisclosed location here in St. Croix, Virgin Islands. No radio, no TV, internet only. Get your Android, your iPhone, your tablet, your iPad, your Mac or your Windows PC. Just open up your browser. Type in streaming live from the VI.com and you'll be able to see the show tonight. All our recorded live shows, close up to about 300, are on YouTube and Ustream.tv. Just simply search for our channel, It's Your Perspective Talk Show, and you'll be able to see all our shows there. Going back almost 2 years now.
That's about it.
Yeah, almost 2 years now.
In April, it'll be 2 years.
Yeah,
I'm
man.
looking forward to my second anniversary.
That's how it goes, man. We got 2 Facebook pages. Hit us up, either one of us. Give us a like there. Want to give a shout out to CHS class of 1982. Big ups to our whole crew there. If you're out there listening to us, give us a call. Let us know how you're doing, where you're hiding out at, and all that good stuff. We're on Twitter. Tweet with us at VI Perspective. Super moving straight forward and up. The show's mission is just to inform, entertain, and empower everyone.
Yes,
And Super,
sir.
you ready?
Yes,
Bless that
sir.
mic.
Greetings in the name of His Divine Majesty, Kidamawi Empire, this last side the first, Rastafari.
Aye.
I hope everyone had a blessed day and a greater night. The greatest secret in life is that reality is nothing more than illusion. The physical world does not exist outside of our own belief system and the filter of our own minds. We are, in fact, subparticles of Jah, experiencing the creation itself. But as subparticles of Jah, we have swayed over these creation. Everything you have experienced in life, every event, occurrence, object, and person, is nothing more than a figment of your own thoughts, beliefs, and words. The problem is, most of us are still asleep. The problem is, most of us are still asleep. When we understand this, our entire world shifts and we come to realize the true meaning of life is thus, like a lucid dream. We have total control.
Yes, Soup. Thanks for blessing us every day, pretty much, for the last almost 18 months, a little more than 18 months, approaching 2 years now. But once again, it gives us great pleasure, man, to say thank you. Our guest tonight is author Gary James. He's back in the studio. There he is right there. Wave to the crowd.
That's right. It's
live
going to be
and
rough
direct.
getting rid of me.
Yeah.
Brother Gary, how you doing, man?
Excellent, man. I had an interesting couple of days thanks to your introduction to me about the Robert Moorhead show.
Okay.
So I was a guest yesterday and this morning, and it was very interesting. I had a good time, and I'm looking forward to some additional appearances and contributions to their ongoing conversation. Some interesting conversations. This conversation, I think, is going to last a couple months, he indicated.
Right.
And it covers different aspects of racism, from religious, political, so forth and so on. So it was good. It was interesting. And but it's good to be home with you guys in this
Yes, sir.
cutting edge studio, high tech.
Thank you for that, man. The high-tech,
I like
low-tech.
that. I like that, man. But so yeah, welcome this evening to Conversations with Gary James, and we, as you may know, this is February, the month of Black History Month, and we're looking forward to talking about Black history and giving some observance of the process of Black history. We will acknowledge and talk about the occasion. And I understand Black History Month is also acknowledged here in the VI, which I find particularly interesting. We'll get into that. But I find it interesting because the advent of Black History Month was advanced by author and historian Carter G. Woodson. And its purpose is educational as described in the name of the occasion. It was invented because Black Americans constitute a minority of the population in the country, and the history of Black folk was not included and is not included in the public school education curriculum. So a great void was missing there, and although in many parts of the country public schools were predominantly comprised of Black/African American students, but the history and social studies classes taught Greco-Roman and European and American history to the exclusion, absolute exclusion, of African and Black American history. So, and the discovery of the New World by Christopher Columbus was a hallmark of the social studies and history curriculum as it relates to the establishment of modern, what we know as modern civilization and manifest destiny of European culture. That was a great part of the curriculum as well. I recall that in high school, manifest destiny. Those words remain etched in my mind as I've seen the expression of that in many ways growing up in the 60s and 70s. Therefore, Black History Month was in fact devoted to fulfilling the enormous gap in history that excluded African Americans and Black history in general. The occasion began as Negro History Week, and it was subsequently expanded to Negro History Month. Negro History Month was a practical follow-up to Woodson's book entitled The Miseducation of the Negro, which was published in 1933, with the demise of the Negro as a term of art during the Black consciousness movement, which was, in fact, Negro was replaced with Black during the Black consciousness movement. And additionally, Black History Month, Black History Week was expanded to Black History Month as we observe it nowadays. As it relates to the Virgin Islands, however, Black History Month is particularly interesting, as I said, because the VI population is predominantly African American, our African ancestry. And so therefore, it would seem logical that the Virgin Islands, or in the Virgin Islands, the name of the occasion would be reversed vis-a-vis White History Month. But that's not the case. And so it's Black History Month, and we are observing it here in the VI and in the United States. By the way, I highly recommend Mr. Woodson's book, the miseducation of the Negro, because the book remains relevant, although the book is 80 plus years old. Black history in America begins with the enslavement of Africans, which lasted for centuries until the advent of the abolitionist political movement and the emancipation of slavery, which occurred in 1865 by way of the Emancipation Proclamation. The period of Reconstruction followed emancipation, and Reconstruction lasted for a little more than 10 years, wherein federal troops were deployed in target states in order to enforce the civil rights of the freed African American former slaves. Reconstruction, however, ended in 1876 with what's called the Great Compromise. The Great Compromise called for federal troops that were protecting the civil rights of black Americans to be withdrawn. In the absence of federal troops, black Americans were targeted and terrorized, and the advent of Jim Crow laws and black codes enforced by the KKK and other white supremacist organizations maintained the status quo of black suppression and segregation. The Great Compromise occurred, however, with the presidential election of 1876, which did not determine a winner. Therefore, a political deal was struck between the Democrats and Republicans, wherein the Republican candidate, Rutherford Hayes, became victorious as a result of the deal, and that is the essence of the Great Compromise. And the Great Compromise had the caveat of Hayes agreeing to recall federal troops. He recalled the federal troops, hence the Great Compromise. Lynching and wholesale terror was visited on black Americans, and they were prevented from voting by ridiculous tests and regulations specifically designed to prevent them from exercising their right to vote as citizens of the United States. And this situation stayed in place from 1876 until the beginning of the civil rights, the modern civil rights movement, which began in 1984 with events like Brown versus the Board of Education, the murder of Emmett Till in 1955, the 10-plus bombings that occurred in Birmingham, Alabama, and one bomb killed 4 children in a church, among other egregious acts. All of these became the impetus for the modern civil rights movement. And the civil rights era occurred in conjunction with Black Power and the Black Consciousness period, which all peaked and ended around 1975. However, the period is famous because of the enactment of the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Acts in 1964 and 1965, respectively, as well as affirmative action initiatives in education, employment, and housing, for example. So from then till now, black Americans have been elected to public office to the extent that black Americans have the most elected officials as compared to other political minorities in terms of political leverage. Black folk remain the weakest. In summary, the political, social, and economic advances that black Americans achieved during the 19th century and the 20th century have not been substantially realized to date. We achieved them and they pulled back in the 19th century vis-a-vis the Great Compromise. We achieved them again during the modern civil rights movement, and they were rolled back with Bakke and reverse discrimination and other sophisticated ways in which power or advances that we have achieved legislatively and statutorily, they have been weakened and removed from existence. And if they remain in place, black folk are the last ones of the minorities to be in a position to take advantage of these things. Women and Asians and gays and other political minorities in America have the best shot to be successful at the advances that occurred by way of the civil rights movement that was spearheaded by black folk, and that was for the purpose of enfranchising black folk. And so, accordingly, here in the middle of the 21st century, the second decade of the 21st century, the black American community at large remains at the bottom of the pecking order. Apparently, we as black folk are doing something wrong in how we are going about achieving political, social, and economic advances and justice, if you will. And the conundrum that continues to beset African Americans is complex, sophisticated, sublime, and is manifold. In so many areas, the same problem besets us, the same obstacles beset us. And essentially, we have lip service from black leaders as well as white leaders, as well as the society in general. Something must be wrong with you guys. And there is no apparent economic and political strategy on the horizon to improve the state of black America in the foreseeable future. While there are structural systems and institutions that maintain the status quo, black Americans have the potential within their hands to significantly improve their at-large situation. Compelling and persuasive arguments have been advanced that the black community can be more effective in the way politics, economics, and social business is conducted going forward. And there's obviously a lot of truth to that. Everything you do could be done better if you approach it that way from the standpoint of we need to do something better. We need to realize the shortcomings associated with how we are doing stuff, particularly politics and economics. However, bad habits, inadequate and ill-informed strategies and tactics present challenges and inertia which keeps black folk under enormous pressure and oriented toward political hype and rhetoric seems to rule the day. Moreover, the systems, institutions, complexity, and sophistication of the challenges that confront the black community at large should not be underestimated. America and modern society is very sophisticated. It is very complex, and it wasn't designed by silly cats. It was designed by people who didn't have to work because they were living wealthy because of free labor of enslaved folk. So they had the capacity to spend their time developing systems to advance their objectives for their foreseeable future. And that's how it has been played by them, who control that which is the status quo. Structured, systematic, sublime, and institutional racism is also a factor, and it is also highlighted as the primary factors that relegate black folk as a whole to marginalization. Although racism, bigotry, and discrimination remain among the facts of life in black Americans, the race issue, is structured and sublime because the concept of the races are in fact a fallacious invention that position black folk as less than human beings. This is an invention that works well for some people and not too well for others. Now let's examine this. Invention of the races occurred many centuries ago with a hierarchical, vertical pecking order that positioned the white race as superior to other races, with the black race the inferior at the bottom of this hierarchy. The motive for establishing and enshrining a racial hierarchy was based on the need for a beast of burden, like mules and cows and other beasts of burden that do work, that do free labor for the master race in perpetuity. And that is what black folks were. We were considered property, and we were dealt with as though we were property until the emancipation scenario. And it is not hard to appreciate that substantial change has not substantially occurred. You know, it has been a modulation of the status quo as opposed to a change of the status quo. And the tragedy in that is our expectation that leaders, black or white, will appreciate the situation and improve the conditions that we are faced with on a daily basis. But that hasn't occurred, and it won't occur, and we have misplaced our confidence in leadership that is not capable because they don't know any better. And there are no structures in place to improve matters because there's no inclination by those who maintain power to change their situation of convenience. Therefore, people in general, and black folk in particular, need to begin to appreciate that change will occur based on the extent to which we change our habits, the way in which we do certain things, particularly the way in which we do politics and economics, and the way we do with each other, you know. And so there are issues that are out there that we need to consider with a different perspective. Obviously, you know, we talk about the importance of unity and solidarity among poor people and black people in particular. But black folk, no one else unifies. It doesn't happen that way. What happens is a critical mass of people, and that amounts to a small percentage of people, understand what the process is and what they have to do, and they go about doing that. And that is what we've been faced with, particularly in terms of how politics is done. But we'll touch on that a little later. But the fact is, we have been in a position, we are in a position to help ourselves, but we have to begin to think outside of our comfort zone. Because for centuries, the free labor of enslaved Africans, economically enriched European countries, which facilitated the Industrial Revolution and the wealth of the United States and Europe. Currently, African Americans are paid for their labor, but wages are marginal and cannot generate wealth for the individual or the community to survive beyond marginalization or just above poverty. In addition, black folk at large aspire to be wage earners. And we tend to focus on education and training and landing a good job. Don't misunderstand me. A good job is laudable, and it is necessary in order to take care of oneself. But we are oriented toward spending time and spending money as opposed to investing time and investing money. So we spend time on our job because we don't want to waste time not getting paid for the time. So we're in a catch-22 situation. But at the same time, we consider spending money, the money that we earn, we consider spending money as opposed to investing money. So we don't invest our time and we don't invest our money. Now when you invest as opposed to spend, there is an expectation of what's called a ROI, a return on your investment. And so you're inspired to invest time and invest money because you understand that there is a return that you could expect. So when you move outside of your comfort zone and realize that spending time and investing money and spending money are two different things, then you could begin to realize what you need to change, what you need to modify, you see. And so when you spend time, it's gone. When you spend money, it's gone. There's no expectation of anything. You spend it for something. So my point is there's a different mindset when you think in terms of spending your assets, time and money, as opposed to investing your assets, time and money. And that may sound trite, but part of our problem as black folk at large is that we don't do any planning. We spend time and spend money. We don't plan on how we're going to spend time or how we're going to spend money to get the best return on our investment of time or money. And that is a basic idea that has to be a part of a new thinking with respect to how we might want to make adjustments to how we do our politics as well as other things that cost quite a bit of time and money. So, according to black folk, spending time and spending money is the thing. Buying stuff and doing stuff we find most important and most rewarding. So I worked all week. I got to do some stuff now. I got to buy some stuff. This new stuff is out. You know, so there are a range of things that we need to rethink. And while preparing for and seeking a job, as I mentioned, is laudable, it will not generate economic wealth, and many argue that aspiring to be a wage earner at the end of the day amounts to volunteer slavery. Moreover, in many cases, in many instances, wage earning inhibits a person from engaging, contemplating, and pursuing greater opportunities for the family, self, and the community, and long-range planning associated with is associated with creating wealth and improving oneself. It just does not happen. You have to plan for outcomes and put the necessary steps in place that after the process, you have a reasonable expectation of something happening in your favor. And so, again, I use the word process. That's another word that we need to become more accustomed to, because when we think in terms of process, it's not buying anything. Process is not an immediate situation, and we are used to immediate or virtually immediate situation. Process is a logistical exercise, how you get from point A to point B. You can get to point A to point B, but you have to figure out the steps in the process that will maximize the opportunity for you to have the result that you want. And that process of planning for a specific outcome is not part of our general orientation because of centuries of how we have been oriented, how we have practiced, and how we have become comfortable with how we do certain things. And another thing that I find interesting, I have to digress for a moment, is because black folk tend to be very skillful in their ability to grasp certain things, like sports, for example. When black folk are introduced to sports that are essentially foreign to them, like a tennis or a football or a baseball, we excel. When you have black musicians who studied the music of white European culture, they studied the instruments and the music, they developed jazz, their whole music, because there is this uncanny sense that we have of creating things, you see. And when we master stuff, and that's what jazz musicians did, they mastered their instrument, they mastered the music, and so they could do improvisation. They don't need to read charts and stuff. And so they've become famous for their improvisation and have developed, in fact, a legitimate African American art form. But apart from our ability to master things that we're not accustomed to, we also realize that we could do stuff off the cuff. We don't need to master stuff. You see, because we could sing, we could dance, we could invent things, you know, that go all over the world, and we could praise how our stuff has moved here or there. We ain't getting the half from it, you know. And in many cases, we are manipulated by the powers that be because that culture or that type of behavior keeps black folk, particularly the youngsters, engaged in stuff that would minimize the extent to which they would engage in other pursuits that might have a greater ROI, you see. But it's not the return on investment when that we consider as youth coming up, when we could rap or do this or do that, you see, and this guy's a millionaire, this guy made $1 million, this guy's record just dropped, this guy's doing this, and so forth and so on. And so there's money that could be made, you see, by our talent. And so I'm not going to engage in the rigor of a learning curve to get involved in some greater things that I might have to sacrifice some stuff that I would like to have if I spend my time inordinately on these things that don't give me any stuff that I could wear or use to show off and show how successful I am in doing what I do. And so there are many, many issues that cloud our perspective on what we need to do and how we need to do it and how important it may be for us to change what we have been doing as a matter of practice. So in many cases, wage earning inhibits a person from engaging, contemplating, and pursuing greater opportunities for family, self, and community, and long-range planning associated with creating the wealth or the better future scenario for our children and grandchildren and so forth and so on. Additionally, the demands with being a wage earner minimizes the extent to which one can invest time in learning how to do things to help advance themselves or the community from point A to point B. It's not an exercise that comes quick, you know, and sometimes you have to sacrifice or go without stuff. And while that might be something you want to avoid, when you go through that process, you realize that, wow, if I didn't sacrifice this time, if I didn't put this time into learning this, wow, I might be relegated to A, B, C, and D as opposed to what I see on my horizon going forward. And I say that with great inspiration because these young brothers, these young entrepreneurs that I'm working with are doing some things that I'm sure have inspired them to reach new heights, and they can see the progress and advancement that they have achieved in just a couple short years. And me as an old dude, watching them and being able to participate in their project, I find particularly inspiring as well. And so I'm inspired to do some other things. And so I want to thank you, my producers.
Thank you, Brother Gary.
Perhaps the most impactful and consequential development to occur that has the potential to generate a paradigm shift in America in general and in the African American community in particular is the recent scientific finding. Current science asserts without equivocation that there are no biological factors that distinguishes the races. Therefore, human beings comprise one race, and all the human beings on the planet today have a common ancestor that originated in East Africa millennia ago. Now, this scientific data has been out for a while, but it won't be translated into practical terms. for a number of reasons. But it's important for us to know and understand so we could appreciate what race is and what race is not. In our view, it exists for sure, but it exists as crystallized consciousness in our mind because it was invented deliberately and it was justified by way of pseudoscience 500 years ago, you see. And so while many were aware that black folk, Africans, were human beings too, the powers that be had the control of the consciousness, the general consciousness of people by way of the institutions that they created and imposed to a large extent on masses of people. But with the race piece, many white folk didn't subscribe to the multiple race idea, or even if they did, some did not appreciate that their black brothers were considered and treated as beasts of burden. Now, this was a serious matter because it wasn't just some regular guys who pulled this off. It was pulled off by people who had nefarious intentions, if not diabolical, because the information was there, but the information was tailored because of the behavior of certain individuals, and greed and control and things of that nature had a lot to do with imposing these egregious ideas in the minds of people that developed this invention and sold everyone else a bill of goods. Academic and scholarship documentation was manufactured to prove that there were many races and there's a hierarchical relationship, and those black guys are beasts of burden and they should work for us for free. And that place where they come from, we need to take hold of that, which was accomplished in 1884 with the Berlin Conference. But that's a horse of another color. That's another conversation. But my point is, there was scientific evidence that was manufactured and promoted that taught race relations and multiple race ideas to the people, to the American people in general. And it was only after a time that white folk, the majority of white folk in Europe, in America, and in the Virgin Islands, had reservations about continuing slavery. And so it was ultimately abolished. Slavery was abolished, but the fact that the paradigm remains and the conditioning remains makes us susceptible to thinking in racial terms. It's a natural thing at this point. But although science has debunked and discredited the theory of multiple races and have published findings broadly, it's not likely that this confirmed data will be translated and applied to the structures, systems, and institutions that define America. Specifically, the theory of multiple races and the hierarchy is structured in education, in politics, in economics, and in the social systems that constitute how business is conducted in America. The politics of the day, the presidential election, regardless to what the main issues are, the subtext, the backstory has a lot to do with race and perpetuating these ideas of race. That's what's happening with the social conservative movement. They do not want to discard their traditional ideas of race, but it's cloaked in a range of sophisticated and complexities that can be spoken of, yet the truth is not spoken, but acts determine. It's the same old, same old. It's the same old, same old. And so we can beef about the hierarchy, or we could begin to take affirmative action, first person singular, regarding the state of affairs. And we, the people, blacks and whites, have the capacity to do that. And the way things are shaking out, not only in America, but indeed the world, people are beginning to realize that they had better begin to get their own confirmed information and resist the temptation to continue following the crowd, because we do a lot of that. And human beings are social beings, and there is a herd mentality among us. And those who are in these positions of influence understand human beings and human nature. And they control media and this and that and employment and who gets wealthy and who gets heard, you know. But there are things that we can do that can interrupt the status quo without causing too many problems, other than the fact that some who don't have will begin to have, based upon how they begin to use the process and how they begin to use their time investing it as opposed to spending it, how they choose to invest their money, not spending it as much as they invest it. And so there are these things that are confronting us, because the way these folks are running the Caribbean, are running the Virgin Islands, are running America, and are running the world, we're in big trouble. Everybody believes that we're in big trouble. And the question is, what's going to happen? And nothing's going to happen unless you do something about it. And so we here at It's Your Perspective talk show, we will talk about this, and we will engage processes and initiatives to help us move forward, and hopefully you will engage the conversation as well, and begin to see how to improve your conditions as well. And so that is what we are about. Now, time is fleeting. Time has fleeted, but I did want to mention something about politics of the day. I would be remiss if I didn't say something about politics, and I don't want to belabor the issue because I do want to go home and watch the debate. But I did make comments about the GOP previously, but this evening I want to make some comments about the Democratic Party. I know them both well. I know them both very well. And so we won't get into that. We'll just mention what I want to say about Democrat politics. And I observed before coming that Hillary Clinton had the Black Caucus members speaking on her behalf, you know, and speaking for her as opposed to Bernie Sanders. And I thought that was particularly interesting because I remember back in 2008 when Senator Obama announced his bid for the presidency. And of course, Hillary was the presumptive nominee. And what I found interesting, in fact, it caused me to write a book about that. What I found particularly interesting was behind Hillary and leading up to the Democratic Party nomination, every black elected official and the civil rights leadership orthodoxy all supported Hillary Clinton vociferously. It wasn't no behind the scenes thing. These cats were out front in support of Hillary. And I said, it really grabbed my attention because I knew that was coming. But it was interesting because at that time, I had no faith in the political acumen of Senator Barack Obama. But he impressed me because there was big talk about Obama didn't have the support of the black elected officials and the civil rights leadership, and he needs to kiss their ring, he needs to see this person, he needs to see that person, and so forth and so on. He needs to court them. And Obama, in all his political wisdom, did not move an inch, did not court the black elected official leadership or the civil rights orthodoxy. He defied all of that. There was one black elected official that I know of out of Harlem, Perkins, who was a city councilman. He defied the black leadership in Harlem and came out for Hillary. And he paid the price. Let me tell you, he paid the price. And of course, he didn't get the seat in his re-election. But Obama impressed me because it was clear that he understood that the black civil rights leadership and elected officials were paper tigers. And Barack Obama went straight to the electorate. And the white folk gave Barack Obama the nomination. And I said, wow, that's pretty deep. And then I still wasn't convinced that he was going to pull it off, because I knew he only conformed to my assessment and analysis of where the black leadership was, you know. And so his end around and victory, I thought, was very astute. But I still believed that he would get swamped in the general election, because I believed, as I believed in the primary, that Obama was the political rabbit to set the pace, and then the big guns come in and bam, he's done. But he prevailed. And so I say that to say that is how I looked at the situation today with Hillary. Bernie Sanders is rocking Hillary. And she brought out her maximum guns in order to intimidate Sanders, because it's not expected that Sanders would have any black votes, the black community. As far as I'm concerned, the jury's out on that, because Bernie Sanders is sitting on top of the Democratic coalition, the broad Democratic coalition of liberals, progressive, leftists, gays, and all these kind of people, which was symbolic of the movement period in the 60s when I was an organizer, you see. And so Bernie has those people. And those people, I know, were dormant in the Republican Party, because just prior to Bill Clinton's election to the presidency, he was heading up the Democratic Leadership Conference. And the Democratic Leadership Conference was put in place because the Republicans had beaten the Democrats for 3 successive years for the presidency. And the Democratic Party believed that they had to move the party to the center in order to win presidential elections. And so Bill Clinton's campaign was a campaign of the Democratic center, and his administration administrated, their administration worked from the center, you see. And Bill was fortunate to get in. He made the right move in terms of moving the party toward the center. But if it wasn't for the fact that Ross Perot, the billionaire tycoon, who ran as a third-party candidate, who took votes from George Bush, see, as he was from Texas as well, that enabled Clinton to get that decisive victory. And the Clinton administration governed from the center-right. And so all of those coalition people had a problem, because they were on the back burner from the Clinton administration, and now here comes Hillary. You see, and so Hillary is riding the same centrist horse, or donkey, as it were. So there is a serious civil war underway in the Democratic Party, just as there is one in the Republican Party. And that's why I have concluded in many of my writings and conversations that both political parties are dysfunctional and are in civil war. And this is the most propitious or timely time for those who have been locked out of the process to reassess how they engage the process going forward in the 21st century. And so I'm closing with that, so I can go home and see the debate and prepare for you folks next time. And I want to thank you for your indulgence, and I want to thank you for indulging me for going over time, probably 15 minutes or so, to talk about the political impact that, as I see it, from the Democratic Party perspective. So that's it. I appreciate you folk, and I look forward to seeing you on the first Thursday in March.
All right, all right.
Thank you.
Author Gary James, thank you very much for coming out and blessing us with some knowledge again. So I guess you will be back March 3rd.
March 3rd, that's when it is.
That's when it is.
I'll be here.
All right. I just want to say that this is the It's Your Perspective Talk Show every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8 p.m. until. Our guest tonight was author Gary James. Thank you once again. It's about 9:13 p.m. Any final thoughts, Soup?
Gary, as usual, it's been a blessing. Been grateful. Thank you much. Rastafari lives. One perfect love. Yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and we like to say one perfect love is our praise and his blessings. When you put it all together, you get one perfect love. We do have a show tomorrow night, Friday. Check Facebook for the details. It'll be popping up here sooner than later. So on that note, we'll see Gary back on the 3rd of March, and we'll be back tomorrow night. Have a good evening, everybody. We'll see you then. Out. Peace.